Welcome back to Friday 5. I'm Caleb Parker. We're here with quick questions, quick answers. We just finished our How to De-Risk Flex Space at JMW Solicitors and sponsored by NCG. Here with Morgan Pierstorff from Newmark and Thomas Pearson from JMW Solicitors to debrief this for our Friday 5. So, quick question for you, Morgan.
Hello, yeah.
How can landlords de-risk flex space?
It's all about education and really taking control and ownership of what a landlord wants within their asset. The asset will help dictate that to some degree, but they really need to know what's under the hood when working with an operator, what makes them tick, how they make money, because they can't really align an agreement until they understand exactly what they're putting into their building.
And one of the big topics was how can landlords look at the right operator for their business plan to make sure that that business plan of the asset matches up with the right operator selections. Thomas, come to you now. A question for you. When a landlord is setting up their management agreement with an operator, what's the first thing they need to be considering?
And the first thing they need to consider when they're setting up their management agreement with the operator is, what do they want to achieve at the outset? What's this operator going to deliver within the building, so they can work together collaboratively to design, if they're going down the management agreement route, what that management agreement looks like, what are the parameters to deliver, what is acceptable within the tolerances, what are they expecting in terms of performance, and then they can set those tones throughout the documents.
And one of the things that was talked about in setting up those management agreements is step-in rights and transparency and reporting. Morgan, when you're advising landlords, what sort of reporting are you expecting from operators for your landlords?
Yeah, I think a lot of times landlords have access to information, but they don't really know what they have access to. They're not looking at it regularly. And because they perhaps haven't educated themselves about the business model, they don't know what those numbers are telling them. So I think, certainly monthly meetings and reporting with your operator is really important. So you have your finger on the pulse of what is happening in that space. They're a reflection of your building, they're a reflection of your brand. And so you want to know quickly if things aren't going well so that you can work with them to course correct. And certainly at minimum, a monthly kind of engagement with them we find to be quite effective.
In which you've been on both sides of the table of those conversations yourself. I'll come back to you, Thomas, for this next question. In the session, the landlord panel today, one question came up about the landlord preferring leases, but he also mentioned how they do management agreements and the leases being on SPVs. So one of the questions that came up from that was, is the risk profile the same between an SPV lease and a management agreement? What's your take on that?
So in an SPV scenario, lease or management agreement, again, subjective to the parties, how's that going to be viewed? There are some protections if you're advising the landlord that can be put in place if you're looking at a lease, but ultimately that's only going to be as strong as the covenant strength of that party. So on balance, do you then push if it is the right thing to do for a management agreement? Because ultimately that might be the more functional agreement that gets you what you need for the space.
Final question. Morgan, what was your biggest takeaway from today's sessions?
I think my biggest takeaway was a comment that came through about being sure to think about the divorce when you're negotiating the marriage. So certainly Thomas can speak to this when it comes to the agreement perspective. But yeah, it's going to be a difficult conversation if your operator isn't working out, if they're not being successful for some reason. It's important to understand why. Is it market fit? Is it something with the asset? But have those difficult conversations early on in the relationship. It'll just make the collaboration easier as it goes through, but don't reserve that to the end. Plan for that from the beginning. So if the worst happens, that everyone can work through it the best they can.
As someone said in the audience, a prenup.
Exactly that. Yeah. So I'd never thought of myself as a property lawyer negotiating prenups, but I'm effectively, in providing that advice to the tenant or to the landlord, I'm preparing for what happens when things don't go right. So you've got to make sure all of those things are in place and people understand where the risk points are, what will happen if a situation arises, and what their options are. So that's being in the right position to give them the right advice based on what they want to achieve from it commercially.
Well said. Thank you very much for that. And you had to be in the room to get the full breakdown, but we gave you a high-level debrief for the How to De-Risk Flex panel. Stay tuned on May 19th, Manchester, Brave Ideas, how to hack the future office product for hybrid companies. Thank you for tuning in. Until next week, take care of yourself.